Hello, my name is Ross Howitt and welcome to this guide to using YouTube for GCSE PE whilst self-isolating. You'll notice on the first slide here this is an AQA specific resource. And we would say to you in these unprecedented times that the idea behind this is we've taken some areas and some topics which teachers have told us are either particularly problematic or particularly useful to be giving students work to do at home. And what we've done is we will give you the link. We'll tell you how long the link is, and we'll give you some tasks which go on a separate sheet which the students can complete. Now on that, and all the sheets, on the 10 sheets that we're giving you for students to complete, we are giving you the versions with the answers, and the answers are in red. Now, these answers are not delivered by AQA Examination Board, they are delivered by HODR, but we are clear and certainly very confident that these are certainly AQA specific and in line with the demands that the board would require. So as we move through this, we first and foremost hope that students are getting work done at home and working as hard as possible at home during these strange times. But equally speaking, we want to make sure that we keep them focused and we keep them moving forward and progressing. So these ideas and the worksheets and the answers are given to you as part of this free presentation. Now the topics are chosen that may or may not have been covered in year 10. So they're fairly gentle in terms of the worksheets and the demands within the worksheets. I think one of the interesting things is that there is obviously a fine balance for these students in terms of using their phone or their computer at home, and certainly some of the parents will be trying to limit that, but we certainly want to try and make them using these things productively. So the idea is that they could use their phone, they could use their tablet, they could use their PC, but they will still be progressing with their learning of GCSE PE. And equally speaking, if this was going to be given to a Year 11 student, the Year 11 student may well be moving forward in towards A-level PE. And all we're doing here is we're allowing them to cement many of the concepts and ideas that they've learnt in Year 11. Now, it is a very flexible learning approach, this. It can be done in many different ways. We're really just giving you the ideas that you can use in your own way. Some of you will have a platform that you could use. The platform may well be like an intranet page, or you may be using the school's website. Some of you may be a little bit more technologically advanced and using a platform like Google Classroom. And certainly all of these things, these links that we're giving you, these hyperlinks to YouTube clips, which have been chosen deliberately, can be integrated into whichever platform you're using. So we're going to crack on. We're also going to, in the process of this, we're going to show you 3 of the clips just to give you a taste of what these actually look like and what they involve. And I have to say as well, put the caveat in right from the word go, guys, there is an absolute wealth of stuff on YouTube which is relevant and on occasions is sometimes better than others. And I think, you know, even if you want to just chuck in here just now, if any of your students have Netflix, for example, before we go into the realms of YouTube today, it's worth bearing into account there's a couple of great things that can be accessed on Netflix as well, which are particularly useful for GCSE PE. One of these is called Icarus. Icarus, many of you will have heard of. It's about 2 hours long, Icarus. It is the 15 in terms of the classification, and it deals with the Russian doping scandal, and it fits really nicely into the topic on performance enhancing drugs. Equally, there's a thing on just now on Netflix, a series called The English Game, about the history of football. So we've got some historical content as well, good for students to have a look at, and certainly has a lot more longevity than what some of the clips we're going to be looking at today are. Because the clips we're looking at today, we wanted to go for things which are fairly short and sharp and less than 10 minutes, say, so that students don't switch off. They can watch the clip and they can do the tasks which are on the worksheet. Now the idea is these tasks are for learning, but equally speaking, these tasks are for an exam focus. And we have this pseudo examiner here. And again, let's be very, very clear. The person who writes the papers is not called Bob and doesn't look like that. But the idea being that what we're trying to do with these tasks is match the demands that our pseudo Bob here may well have in future for examinable PE. So this is the whole idea for this particular presentation, so we'll crack on. So what we've got, first and foremost, the first one is on performance enhancing drugs. You can see there it's 3 minutes and 41 seconds long, so not too onerous a task for the students, and the hyperlink is included there. as it is in the sheets that go with this presentation. This particularly focuses and concentrates on the concepts of anabolic steroids and on EPO. And I hasten to add, it is absolutely fine for the students to call it EPO. They don't need its full difficult word, particularly to spell, of erythropoietin. It does weigh up the pros and the cons of taking illegal PEDs, which of course is part of the specification. So when weighing up the idea, is it really worth it? Why are they bothering to do it? Would people decide therefore not to do it? And I have to say the language is relatively simple within it, which is good. It's student friendly. There's not too many blinding physiological terms in there. We'd start off in the sheets with the likes of, well, which two performance enhancing drugs are named in the clip. So it does require the students to actually listen and watch the clip. And then think about the physiological reasons why an athlete may choose to take them. And we have, as part of this sheet, and all of the sheets, we've included extension tasks as well. So after they complete a table to suggest positives and negatives, if there is such a thing as positives, of taking illegal PEDs, generally for athletes, what we've done, as I said before, is we've gave you what I think is a really comprehensive set of answers, but we've also included an extension task. An extension task very much to do with the concept of AO3 is to get the students to think. So for example, the extension task on this particular one is to evaluate why a discus thrower may decide to take anabolic steroids. And that evaluate comment in there would be in relation to what's its importance, what's its worth. And it would allow the students, if they wanted to look at both sides of the argument. Okay, number two is on hooliganism. Obviously, we've got a distinctive drop in hooliganism right now because quite simply there is no sport going on at all. But this one, and I have to say, we have to put the caveat on this, as you would expect with a hooliganism video clip, there does contain some violence. The violence is not to the extent that it's like an 18 classification, but there is, of course, some elements of some people hitting each other in football stadiums, for example. But 5 minutes 55 seconds. What it does do in an interesting way is it looks at the reasons why hooliganism occurs at all, and it does start to touch on the strategies to prevent hooliganism. So what you've got there is, realistically, you've got a real match towards what the specification requires. And we've got things in the sheets like state 4 reasons why a person may decide to take part in activity that could result in them being called a hooligan. Equally, we've got things like strategies were largely lacking in the clip. Could you think of strategies that would prevent hooliganism? So this idea, again, of getting the students to think. And we have put some things in, again, some more kind of AO3 things in terms of, well, justify your choice of which strategy you think would work best. And many of you will remember that there has been an extended question which dealt with those kind of commands as well. So the final extension question would be, evaluate the reasons why a hooligan would decide to take part in unruly violent behaviour, which in many ways is actually the definition of what hooliganist behaviour is. So in 3, we've got this concept of etiquette, gamesmanship, and sportsmanship, 3 distinctive terms. And I have to say they're 3 distinctive terms that cause problems for students historically in their answers in examinations. It's a 5 minute 45 second clip. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you the opportunity now to watch the clip before we take this any further. Here we go.
Hi, it's Rich from Planet PE, and today we are going to move on to looking at some paper 2 topics, in particularly looking at the conduct of players. So let's see how we go with today's topic. So when we look at the conduct of players, we're looking at things like sportsmanship, we're looking at things like gamesmanship, and about those unwritten rules that you might see in a game of sport that sometimes we may even think are the rules, but probably are actually more about the conduct or the expectations of the player's behaviour. So let's have a look at those terms then and see how we go, and then how we're going to use them in the exam itself. And again, remember, these are paper 2 topics. So if we have a look at the first one about etiquette. Okay, so etiquette is a set of unwritten rules that players will abide by. Now, they're not written down, they are not laws, they are literally a set of expectations that players will play by. So I'll give an example. So in a game of football, if there's an injured player, what will tend to happen is that the players will kick the ball out so the player can receive treatment. Now that might seem like, you know, it's just some sort of good sportsmanship, sort of good behaviour, and it is. But the thing that is really, really important to a game of football is then the ball would be then returned back to the opposition. So again, have a look at this little clip that's coming up to see how that happens. And also, there are some times when that etiquette is not followed. So let's have a look.
This tie will be remembered for very different reasons. Alan Kelly's clearance was put into touch to allow Lee Morris to receive treatment at the other end of the field. Ray Parlour intended to give the ball back with his throw-in, as is the convention, but Nwankwo Kanu, 11 minutes into his English debut, misunderstood the situation, and Mark Obermar's instinctive reaction was to take the chance. United, understandably, were incensed, but their anger was matched only by Arsenal's embarrassment, and before the end, the champions had already decided on a sporting and unprecedented solution: to offer a rematch.
The expectations, those unwritten rules, were not followed. Now, they've not broken any rule. It's not that they've cheated, but the expectation in the game is that when that happens, that you return the ball back, and everybody expects that. In the same way that in golf, you expect that people will be quiet while you're playing your shot. In snooker, we expect that the opposition will remain seated while you're playing your shot. They're not walking around having a look at what you're doing. And they are all etiquettes, all that set of unwritten rules. So that's that first topic. Now, the second one is all about sportsmanship. Now, we know about sportsmanship. You know, we hopefully play to the rules of the game all the time. The definition of sportsmanship is the appropriate, polite and fair behaviour whilst participating in a sporting event. So the fact that you know you're going to get punched in the face when you box in, that's fine. It's kind of part of the rules. It's fair. However, if someone does to maybe start to use their head, use their elbows, you know, hold on, things like that, maybe that's not sportsmanship, because it's not part and it's not fair and it's not polite. It's not those rules that we expect. Now, with sportsmanship, we might do things like, if I am batting in cricket, that if I was to hit the ball, I know I've hit the ball, I might then walk and not wait for the umpire to give me out, because I know what I've done, and that's polite, that's fair, and it's kind of within the rules of the game. Well, it's not really expected that I have to walk, but that would be good sportsmanship. Again, if somebody's fallen down in the game, maybe I'll offer a hand and help them up. That's polite, it's fair, it's within the rules of the game. Now, where we have something slightly different is gamesmanship. Now, gamesmanship is where people might bend the rules. They are sort of dubious methods where it's not strictly illegal, but it might be pushing those sort of boundaries. And this is where maybe diving comes in. So diving in football is now kind of illegal, but people still get away with it. So they're kind of bending the rules. And that idea of gamesmanship is something that players will use to gain an advantage. So if we were looking at a game of basketball, maybe there's been contact, somebody might maybe jump to the floor more than they maybe should have. They might sell a push in a game of football to maybe make it seem worse than it was. And that whole thing is that, you know, it was a foul, but I've made it look worse. Maybe we stay down for longer. We maybe appear to be more injured than actually we are. And that is what I mean by gamesmanship. Now, all of these different topics are all about players' conduct. So in the exam, you might get a question asking you to reference the player's conduct and the effect it has on the sport. Well, clearly, if people are playing to the etiquette of the game, people are using sportsmanship, then the game will be played in a fair manner and people will then, you know, play the sport as it should be played. However, if people start to use lots of gamesmanship, that might start to influence the referee's decisions more, therefore might maybe affect the spectators around because they're thinking that people are cheating, or actually the players' conduct themselves might start to play more to the referee rather than the rules of the game. So they're the sort of topics that you would see if you were looking at players' conduct. So again, as always, please like and subscribe to the channel. Check us out on Instagram, we're getting more and more things out there. And if you are in the midst of revision, check out the 5-a-day playlist that's probably up here somewhere in a second. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, and I think the interesting part within this is when you watch this clip, I think we would expect students, and it's good on this as well, we would expect students to be able to write down what the terms mean, what etiquette means, what gamesmanship means, what sportsmanship means. And you can see here why it's a good idea to give the students the sheets before they watch the clip. Now the idea there as well, can you think of a sporting example of those terms? And there are sporting examples, as we've seen in the clip themselves. It's often good as well to see if you could get them to think of any more. Now on the sheets, we've also included another file that they could open, another YouTube clip. It's a very interesting clip of Sir Ben Ainslie. Sir Ben Ainslie talking at a university to students about the concept of gamesmanship. And it's gamesmanship, we would say, that students struggle with the most. This idea of bending the rules to gain an advantage, but not breaking them. And the number of times we get this idea of students writing down about breaking the rules for gamesmanship. And it's interesting to see how Ben Ainslie openly admits how he used gamesmanship in the Olympic Games. And there is, of course, an extension activity, which this time is a justify one, but justify why sportsmanship is important in a sporting activity of your choice. So we wanted to match the demands of the exam, because sometimes you get these forced argument short answer questions. This is a 3-mark question. Justify why sportsmanship is important in a sporting activity of your choice. There should be no argument there at all about why it isn't. It's a forced argument. It is. Now agree with me. That's the kind of thing that Bob, our examiner, is saying with that particular question. Okay, quite a tough topic for students. Again, we've tried to put some things in which certainly will get students thinking at home, get them working at home, and also in many ways we don't want it to be too easy, but we want to sometimes introduce some things that they haven't done. They're losing valuable face-to-face time with you, the teacher. So this one, the topic is the interpretation of a spirometry trace. And I have to say there, I would suggest this is the only one in here that we would limit the amount that should be watched. We would suggest you only watch the first 2 minutes and 52 seconds, because after 2 minutes 52 seconds, and we have to put this caveat in there, it does get a little bit more complex. Many of you will be aware that spirometry traces are a very difficult thing to find good resources on, because spirometry traces, when you use the likes of a Google search or go through Bing or Yahoo or whatever, are quite often too complex. This is good if you watch the first 2 minutes and 52 seconds, and it does show a spirometry trace. Now, I think the interesting thing is we've tried to put in the extension task in the worksheet on this particular one to try to get them to draw a trace. Guys, if you want to add to that, think about getting them to draw a trace which would be for steady state continuous exercise. In other words, it would go up and get more frequent but stay the same. And also think about, if you want to try and extend your students further, think about going for, if they've started to exercise of increasing intensity, this idea that the tidal volume would keep going up, keep increasing. So we have asked them within this to look at the following terms and write down what tidal volume, ERV, IRV, and residual volume mean. And we've even tried to make it as simple as possible. If it is an introductory task for these students, what does the black squiggly line justify, or signify, I should say? And the black squiggly line is simply the tidal volume within the trace. The students won't have seen something like this, and some of them will potentially mix it up, maybe with the idea of an ECG, if they've seen an ECG before. And we've also tried to match it to the specification in terms of, well, what do you think would happen to that squiggly tidal volume line if exercise was to start? And that's where you could start to look at that extension activity of drawing a spirometry trace. Good task for students to do. And in my honest opinion, having seen lots of students try things like this in the past, they do find the drawing of the spirometry trace quite hard to do. Now again, with these tasks, you may well be setting them on a platform like Google Classroom, and you can get the students to either take a photo or take a scan or take a snapshot and send it back to you to have a look at. So the idea is they're fairly quick, they're not too It would take, you know, a reasonable chunk of time in a student's day to watch the clip and think about the questions and submit the questions. So we then moved on. We thought it'd be ridiculous of us to not do this, certainly to put in planes of movement. Planes of movement historically, along with axes of movement and along with levers, really has become the traditional thing where students say, I really struggle with this. And it's quite a nice way to introduce or to reinforce this topic. It's only 4 minutes, 24 seconds long. And I think the interesting thing is what we've decided to do in this, we've used a real life PE teacher. It's a real PE teacher who's attempted something for their students and put it publicly on YouTube to try and get the students to understand what the planes of movement are. Let's just put the caveat in there. We'd suggest you talk about moving in a plane of movement and around an axis. This one is all about moving in a plane of movement. Now, try to add some examples. So for example, I would say that it'd be good if you could get your students to add more examples than what the PE teacher gives. Certainly for the transverse plane, that T for transverse, T for top and bottom, because it divides you into top and bottom. Some people use T for tutu, because you can like touch the tutu dress. That's the movement in the transverse plane. But we're very simply getting them to name the 3 planes, give sporting examples of movement in the 3 planes, and to state how the 3 planes divide you up. So the likes of the sagittal plane divides you into sides, but involves movements forwards and backwards. And we have been nasty on this one. We have put a nice little extended 6-mark question in there. Evaluate the importance of each plane of movement when playing netball. So we've gone very specific because the likes of the transverse plane has correlation to netball pivoting. Okay. Next one, axes of rotation. And it's quite often, in my opinion, good for students to learn planes, then axes, and then join them together. So this particular clip, which is only 3 minutes, 58 seconds long, and I have to say that generally speaking, it's really clear. Within, you know, trying to get across the axis of rotation in just under 4 minutes is no mean task. And it's good, I've got to be honest, the chap that does this particular one, you'll see in there, it's a YouTube channel that he has for this particular one, and he gives out free clips to PE students on a YouTube channel.
Hi, it's Rich from Planet PE and thank you for watching this video. So you may have already watched the video on planes and axis, you may have watched the one just on planes, and this one is just on axis. So if you're new to the channel, I'm a PE teacher, I'm a head of PE, and I'm here to try and help you in your GCSE PE exams. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, like the videos, and again follow us on Instagram and on Twitter, and try and get in the comments so you can try and help you out as best as we can. So, axes. Axes are all about rotation. So if I get my speaker here, I can rotate it in lots of different ways. Now, with that, it's rotating through an axis. So an axis is a point of rotation. So it's an imaginary line. It's not really going through us, but it is the point that we rotate around. So I'm going to use my speaker as that example. So I can rotate my body essentially over 3 different axes. So I can rotate it like this, I can rotate it like this, and I can also kind of rotate it like that. So what we need to understand is what does that mean and how are you going to use it in your exam. So if you watch the video here, you will see a somersault. So as the performer is going to perform a somersault, they are spinning essentially end over end, head over feet. Now that sort of rotation is like this. So from here, there is a point of rotation in the middle that it's spinning around. So imagine that I put a big knife through here, it would spin like this. Now that axis there is what we call a transverse axis. So imagine that you had a table football player, they are getting kebabbed essentially through the middle, and they're going to be spinning around that axis. So that first one is our transverse axis. We could also spin this way. So if I was going to spin this way, that point of rotation this time is going to be in the middle, and you'll see the volume buttons that are going to spin around there. So if you watch our video here, you'll see that we've got somebody performing a cartwheel, and they are spinning through the point of their belly button, that everything's rotating around that central point. Now that type of axis is what we call our sagittal axis. Now if you're doing AQA PE, this is correct. If you're doing LXL, the language might be a bit different, so just be aware. So our sagittal axis goes through our belly button and then we spin around that point. The third axis is through our longest point, so a longitudinal axis. So this one is going to basically going all the way through and we rotate like this. So think about an ice skater, again see the video, have a look at how they're rotating. They're spinning really quickly like this, and they're going through their longitudinal axis, okay? So they are spinning like that. Now, if you're thinking, okay, I've got this, I've got longitudinal axis, okay, I've got the sagittal axis, I've got the transverse axis, brilliant. Okay, what we need to think about next is which plane works with which axis. Now, if you haven't already, go onto the playlist, have a look at some of my older videos where I've tried to bring things together, and it's slightly longer video. So these ones, just quick fire, we've got 3 different planes. We've got our longitudinal axis, we've got our transverse axis, and we've got our sagittal axis. Simple as that. Again, please make sure you carry on watching the videos every single Thursday. You get new content. Please like, subscribe, and follow us on those social media platforms we said at the start of the video. Good luck. Again, if you have any mocks coming up, please put in the comments when they are, and I will get some live sessions out where hopefully we get thousands and thousands of you watching it like I had last year before the main exams. Good luck, and I'll see you soon.
So we'd ask them to watch the whole lot and to basically just state what the 3 axes of rotation are called, again giving a sporting example, again explaining how they cut the body up. You know, if it was like a skewer or a javelin going through a human body, God forbid, then how would that be described? Describe how that works. But the extension activity asks them to complete a table, to then correlate the planes and the axes. So if you are going to try and use this one, we'd suggest you do the planes one first before the axes. And you end up with the combinations of sagittal plane, transverse axis, frontal plane, sagittal axis, transverse plane, longitudinal axis. And those correlations can be remembered with a little rhyme called sometimes fun starts too late. And the first letters of that rhyme, sometimes fun starts too late, give you the first letters of the plane, then the corresponding axis. Okay, 7. Again, we're going for some interesting ones, but also ones that will get our students thinking. And lever systems is certainly something that not only gets students thinking, I'd say it certainly gets teachers thinking as well. Only 2 minutes, 35 seconds of watching this one, but it does cover the main points. And that's the important part. It covers the main points and allows students to start to get a grasp. We're all going to have, the year 10s in particular, when they come back, hopefully, in September for the start of year 11, there is always going to be a little element of a catch-up here. And these could be used for catch-ups, but equally speaking, they could be used to get students up and running. So the catch-up isn't quite as stark when they come back in September. Now I have to say, try and remember that the elbow extension is a first-class lever as well. This clip talks about the neck being a first-class lever, which it is. And I hasten to add the board we're talking about today would mark that correct, because it is correct. The neck is a first-class lever. The one that's stated in the specification is tricep extension, so extension at the elbow caused by the triceps. So with this particular one, it very simply gets them to state things like, well, how many classes of lever are there? And from the video, what's the first class of lever, which is given in the video? What's the second class of lever? What's the third class of lever given in the video? And then the extension is to start to try to get them sketching the lever. Sketch them drawing levers, labeling the fulcrum, the effort, and the load. And I have to say, guys, there's a golden rule on this. Always get the students to draw the effort point last. Get them to hold, for example, a pen and pretend that that is the lever which has been pushed down with a load, and the effort always goes the way which would balance that lever out. Okay, now I hasten to add on that. It's an interesting point, because the introduction to lever systems obviously it's a very simple way of introducing lever systems. Okay, so what we got on 8, classification of skills. Classification of skills relates to a triple jump example. And it is for many people. The classification of skills is an interesting area for lots of the students, because the bit that they quite often miss in this is that, generally speaking, classification of skills would involve the command word of justify. And that's because it's often the case that you could go either way on classifying a skill. This particular clip, 2 minutes 27 seconds, it shows Jonathan Edwards. It's, you know, certainly one of, if not the best triple jumper ever. And it does include a help section on the sheet. So we've gave them on the sheet what basic and complex means, what open and close means, what self-paced and externally paced means, and what gross and fine means. With the idea being it will help them to complete the sheet. And the idea is this particular sheet focuses entirely on the concept of triple jump. Okay, in 9, it's a combined learning. So for 9 and 10, and we're going to let you see this clip in a second, but this combined learning, number 1, is about netball. And I think it's an interesting thing for the AO2. Students are struggling at times to relate their knowledge to specific sports. So it's good for them, even if they're not a netballer, to look at the sport and apply their knowledge. And it is a combined learning task, and it's all to do with components of fitness and fitness testing. Only 2 minutes 4 seconds. It's a highlights clip. It involves England netball at their finest. But they're mixed questions on components and tests, and we could give them this as a challenge. How many could you complete verbally in a minute? How many could you then write down afterwards? So it can be done as a challenge. So we're going to give you the opportunity just now to watch this clip.
Clark into Hart, who'd come out for it. Housby, how'd you like that?
Fabulous work there, and great from those two.
This time, she likes the angle. Oh, and around! Gift wrapped to Jiva Mentor. Now they see the clock counting down on the first quarter. Last 10 seconds. Patient from England. They know they've got to make that clock count, but they don't want to give the ball back to South Africa. She'll turn and shoot. And Joe Harton sinks the goal to end the quarter. Oh,
Great
what a feat.
take, Potgieter. Fabulous hands.
It barely touched skin on the way through. It barely touched net.
Nice quick play here from South Africa. Lovely sweep round from Holzhausen. Oh, Joe Harton. What a fake pass to Housby onto the post. Love that.
Oh, that was not easy to do.
No. Berger getting every other pass as it came down the centre of the court. Great skill level. What a pass!
Rachel Dunn has another moment. She'll have an opportunity. And that one stands. The crowd expected. Liverpool expected. The semi-finals were already won, but it's winning with style for England's Roses.
Okay, and we hope you enjoyed the clip. Some great play involved in that clip, and certainly something that the students can then apply, for example, different components too within the questions, like coordination. We talk about the multi-stage fitness test. We talk about reaction time, which is a real problem definition for students. And we also talk about things like the Anderson-Wall toss test. And there's some definitions in there. And what we're trying to do is combine those concepts of components of fitness and tests into one task that students could be doing while self-isolating or while staying at home. Okay, last one, another combined learning task. And I think it's an interesting one in that we've combined planes and axes and levers. And what I would say to you on this, do not be put off by the fact it's planes, axes and levers. We want this to be seen as very much being a very doable task. It is a task that students could do on their own at home, assuming they've done the planes sheet, the axes sheet and the levers sheet, or your students have already covered those topics already. This time we're using the concept of basketball, and there's some fantastic basketball to watch in there, and even the students that are not involved in watching basketball very much should enjoy the clip for the simple fact there are some amazing plays, like it says on the slide. Now what you've got is you've got this concept here. Again, we wanted to try and give them some challenge. These guys are PE students, they like competition and they like challenge. This idea of can you complete, even if it's verbally, 6 questions in 1 minute. And they really do need to look at the questions before they try this particular sheet, because they do get asked, for example, give an example from the clip. Give an example from the clip. These are the types of questions. And it then talks about things like free throws or set shots. So there are terms which are used in the clip which the students need to use, again improving their AO2 knowledge. So guys, the idea has been that we're trying to give you some tasks for your students to do whilst at home. We certainly hope your students enjoy the task. We certainly hope you have a go at some of the tasks. Just remember guys, as a final one with a little smirk on my face, remember to remove the answers before you send those sheets out. We wanted to give you what we feel is the correct depth of answer within the resource that goes with this PowerPoint. Guys, best of luck. Keep the students moving forward. Let's although we've got things like Joe Wicks in the morning at 9 o'clock, etc. It's fantastic the students are keeping themselves active, but we've got to keep the brains active as well and keep them progressing so we're not too far behind when these year 10s come back in year 11. Guys, best of luck. I'll hopefully speak to some of you soon and stay safe. Thank you.